Hey guys, hope you had a good weekend. Last week we finished up talking about World War One, and we really discussed at the end of it the Treaty of Versailles and how that really helped lead into World War Two, right? So you had a Germany that was so decimated, that was so beaten down by this treaty, uh, that it really opened the way for Adolf Hitler and the Nazis to take power, where the people were saying, hey, you say you're going to fix all these problems, you're going to right all these wrongs that have been done to us. Okay, we will, accept you as our leader and embrace you as our leader, and that obviously helped start World War II because you're going to have Hitler and the Nazis come in and try and take these territories, and finally people are going to stand up to them and say, no, we're not letting that happen. Okay, and so that really is what started World War II. But to kind of prepare for talking about World War II, I want to talk to you guys about the rise of totalitarianism because that's going to play a big factor in this situation as well. And so that's really what the Nazi regime, the Nazi government was a totalitarian government. So totalitarianism, guys, it's defined as a system of government that is centralized and dictatorial and requires complete subservience to the state. All those fancy words basically mean that you have a dictator, right, one person in charge, and the citizens of that country, their rights as individuals, they don't really matter. Okay, it's all about the good of the country, the good of the state. Okay, so you had several countries, guys, that between World War I and World War II are going to become totalitarianism or totalitarian um, to some extent. Okay, including Germany, Italy, Japan, Spain, the Soviet Union. Okay, so that's kind of the situation with this. So in Italy, you had the rise of fascism. So you have this guy Benito Mussolini. He created the fascist party in Italy in 1919. So right after World War One, basically. And so fascism, guys, that's just kind of a um, very nationalistic uh, branch of totalitarianism. Okay, um, so very nationalistic, and just this, like we said, with totalitarianism, this idea that the nation is more important than the individuals and their rights. Okay, and so he's going to use the black shirts, as they are known, these thugs, to beat people up and intimidate them, anybody who opposed the party. And so he really capitalized on the fear of the spread of communism. So uh, something we didn't really get to touch on a whole lot because of time limitations. The Russians, guys, they made a separate peace in 1917, like I talked about in our Versailles video. And remember, they had a Russian Revolution, and that's why they made a separate peace. So the communists came in and took power and created the Soviet Union. And so there was this fear that this happened in Russia, it could happen in our country too. And so there's a lot of people that were worried about communism and the spread of communism. And so he said, "Hey, I'm the answer to the Communist Party. You know, if you don't vote for me, you're going to let the communists come in and take over." Okay, and so another big thing for him was he claimed he was going to restore order to Italy and restore the prestige of Italy, going back to the Roman Empire and all that. And so part of that idea of restoring the order, guys, it seems kind of simple and funny, but this idea of making the trains run on time. So the train system was a mess in Italy because they had no order. They had no, um, you know, they did not have a government that could um, make sure that that was happening, that those trains were on time, and actually is a big deal as far as people's schedule being late and all those things. So by him saying that, that was saying, hey, I'm going to bring order to Italy. So you also had the USSR that I just mentioned, guys, the Soviet Union, so under Joseph Stalin. So not exactly totalitarianism in its purest form, but basically in the end, that's what you had, right, as a dictator. You had a dictator in Joseph Stalin. He is going to take over for Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, V.I. Lenin, the person who started the Communist Party in Russia, basically, as far as he was the first leader of the Soviet Union, communist Russia. So Stalin's going to take over him after outmaneuvering a guy by the name of Leon Trotsky. Eventually, he'll have Trotsky assassinated. 1928, he started his first 5-year plan, and this was to boost the Soviet Union's industrial capabilities and boost their farm output. He created these collective farms and things like that. It was a big problem. They produced more steel. It was a success in that sense, but it caused millions and millions of Soviet citizens to die. Okay, so it was bad, 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 and there's a fine line between Stalin and Hitler, honestly, guys. So both of them, as you can see, were responsible for millions of people's deaths. So the only difference is Stalin was our ally. I shouldn't say that's the only difference, but that's one of the big differences. All right, he's also very brutal, very paranoid. Sent millions of people to the Gulag, which was a prison camp in Siberia. So imagine living and working in Siberia for the rest of your life. Obviously, a lot of people couldn't survive that environment and died from that as well. Okay, so here's the big one, guys: Germany and Adolf Hitler. So you have the Nazis, this fascist group. So Nazi actually stands for National Socialist. So we talked about that nationalism factor with the fascists, and Hitler, guys, he really modeled what he was doing after Mussolini. He looked at Mussolini as kind of his hero, embracing this idea of fascism, embraced the idea of, hey, I'm going to save us from the communists. Uh, but he started out as a failure. So in 1923, he led this, it was called the Beer Hall Putsch, and it was basically trying to overthrow the government, create a revolution, and they tried to start it in a beer hall, and uh, terrible failure. He's arrested, put in jail, writes this book called Mein Kampf, where he basically lays out, hey, these are my, it translates to my struggle. Hey, this is what I see. This is my issue with what's going on in Germany, and this is how I'm going to fix it. And a lot of it had to do with, I'm going to right the wrongs of the Treaty of Versailles, like we talked about. Hey, it's the Jews' fault. All these problems we're having in Germany, it's the Jews' fault. I'm going to make the Jews pay too. All these different things. And so when he gets out, guys, he kind of retools himself, says, okay, I'm not going to overthrow the government. I'm going to take control of the government. I am going to win the votes. Okay, and so that's what he does. And once again, he follows Mussolini's lead. He recruits these stormtroopers, these brown shirts, and they do basically what Mussolini's black shirts did. They intimidate people that are against the Nazis. They're, hey, you're supporting this guy. Okay, we're going to go beat you up and all that, and running amok in the streets. And so by 1932, guys, they have the majority in the Reichstag, which is their Congress, basically, Germany's Congress back then. And so that prompts them to decide to make Hitler chancellor, and then from there he gains dictatorial powers after the Reichstag fire. So there's a fire. A lot of people think Hitler was actually responsible for it, but he blamed the communists, and people freaked out and were scared, and so he said, okay, I'm going to seize control of this situation, and he used that power to become the Führer, the leader. So someone with dictatorial absolute power. So Japan, guys, they're also going through this a little bit. It's not a one-person dictatorship, though. This is more of what we call an oligarchy, where you have a group of people that control the government, and it's supposed to be the emperor. It's supposed to be, I guess, a dictatorship. But the real people that gain power, gain control of the country in the 1920s is the Japanese military. So the general and navy staff, they basically assume power, and the emperor to some extent is basically a pawn. So he kind of has this idea that, hey, if I don't do what the military wants, they're probably going to assassinate me and find somebody that will. And so that's kind of his fear and his issue. Not that he's blameless, but um, so they think, hey, we're supposed to rule the earth. It's our destiny. The kind of the old Japanese, samurai teachings. Becomes very popular again. Um, and so they go set about trying to expand throughout Asia. They invade Manchuria in 1931. Then they invade, so that's a territory in northwest China. Then in 1937, guys, they invade China proper. So, not just a territory of China, but China itself. You have the rape of Nanking, is what it's called. It's called that for a reason, guys. So, millions of Chinese women were raped and mutilated and killed by Japanese soldiers when they took over the what was the former capital of China, Nanking. Um, so bad situation there. And then you have the Spanish guys. You have this guy Francisco Franco. He was a Spanish general, so he was fascist as well, and he led a civil war against the Spanish loyalists. Okay, people that were loyal to the Spanish crown, and overthrew them. So Mussolini and Hitler, they gave military assistance to Franco, and so in 1936 they declared their independence basically from that government, and he created his own fascist government. So you have fascism in Spain as well. Okay, and so all these fascists, they're vying for power. They want power, and don't forget the nationalist part of this, guys. And so basically, this idea of I'm putting my country above these other countries. I'm putting my country in the most advantageous position. Well, when you do that, sometimes you step on toes. And so that's going to be a big part of helping start World War II, is these fascist governments trying to expand their power and influence. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good start to your week.